Mark Levine, it's good to see you again. Thank you very much for the interview.
Libby, it's always a pleasure and an honor. God bless you.
Mark, let's start with the most critical question. What do you think about ICC decision to issue arrest warrants to Prime Minister Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant?
The ICC has become an operation of the Marxists, Islamists, the Jew haters. Certainly isn't what it was supposed to be. We have nothing but contempt for it among conservatives and most of the American people. You see, our view is we are a sovereign country and we don't need some international court filled with foreigners telling us what to think and what to do. So we have refused to become part of it, just like the state of Israel, for good reason. And you can see how poisonous it is. It's got a prosecutor there who's obviously a pervert, and he's harassing women, and now he's under investigation. His brother's a pervert. He's in jail for being a pervert. And that's a good thing because the whole system is perverted over there with the ICC. You got these three judges, the top judge from France, doing the bidding of South Africa, which is doing the bidding of Iran and Qatar. A recent report came out that Iran and Qatar are funding South Africa, including funding this complaint. But the idea that the Israeli people, that their representatives in the government are committing acts of genocide and war crimes against the Palestinians in Gaza is sickening. It's a blood libel. The fact of the matter is Hamas is killing its own people. The fact of the matter, Iran is using Palestinians as fodder. And Israel and the Israelis are just trying to live their lives and not be bothered by all these people who apparently want to eviscerate and destroy them. We in the United States get this. We understand. We're not France. We're not Germany. We're not Canada. And that fool for prime minister there, Trudeau, we're not any of that. And the vast majority of Americans stand behind not just Israel, but your prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. And he's looked upon in the United States as a very Churchillian figure. And we know that our president, Donald Trump, is very fond of him. We know he's very fond of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. He's got Jews in his family. And you could also see the Republican leadership in the Senate, once it takes over in the House, that we are going to punish the ICC. It could just as easily be our president who they indict and send criminal warrants out on. But the idea, Libby, that you have these mass, monstrous, murdering regimes all over the world, including in your neighborhood in the Middle East, where they're there by the scores, and that they don't have any complaints filed, there's no criminal warrants issued on them, but only the Jews and only Israel and some dead Hamas leader. So my view of the ICC is it's corrupt, it's part of the UN is corrupt, and people who believe in liberty and people who believe in justice get it.
And how do you think the U.S. should act?
How should we act? Well, we ought to pass a law where if the ICC thinks it has the authority, the extra legal authority to reach into our country just like it's reaching into yours, where we have not conveyed jurisdiction to them, just as Israel hasn't conveyed jurisdiction to them, my view is that we ought to pass a law that says, okay, now we have jurisdiction over the ICC. And we have jurisdiction over all the jurisdictions the ICC claims. If they can do it unilaterally, why can't we? And also, in every respect, when it comes to the UN and their funding and so forth, we define their sources of funding and do whatever we can to cut it off. 25% of the United Nations budget comes from the United States. And the American people are sick and tired of the UN. Most Americans want the UN to get the hell out of our country. We don't like all these barbarians coming into New York and having a meeting and attacking Israel most of the time, and the other times attacking us. So the American people are very smart about this sort of thing, and I think our representatives, our new representatives, who are going to control the majority of Congress, they're going to be thinking outside the box. How do we punish this outfit, and how do we punish these people?
Mark, as you know, Trump imposed sanctions on ICC in 2020. The Biden administration removed these sanctions in 2021. Do you think there's any connection between the removal of these sanctions and the warrant that Prime Minister Netanyahu and Gallant are getting?
Yeah, 100%. I don't care what statements Biden puts out. The truth is that prosecutor, the pervert that I was talking about, he got there with American support. Biden and Blinken could have put an end to this. They could have said, no, we're gonna reinstitute the Trump sanctions against the ICC. You got Chuck Schumer, who brags about being the first Jewish majority leader in the United States Senate, who single-handedly is blocking what's coming out of our House of Representatives and our Speaker of the House, which are sanctions against the ICC. He's blocking it. And by the way, he's also allowing votes taking place in among Democrats in the Senate to withhold $20 billion of arms sales from Israel. So the enemies of Israel, whether they're armed terrorists or whether they're in the capitals in Europe and so forth, they see what the United States administration is doing. But they also saw what happened 2.5 weeks ago, where Donald Trump won in a landslide. He swept into Republican control of the Senate, that the Republicans held on in the House of Representatives. You have a Speaker in the House who is pro-Israel. He's an evangelical Christian. You have a majority leader coming in of the Senate who's also a very faithful practicing Christian who stands with Israel. And obviously Donald Trump stands with Israel too. So it's going to be a different day for the Middle East. It's going to be a different day for Israel. And it's going to be a different day for these international European organizations, which Donald Trump cannot stand apart from Israel. He just doesn't like them.
And how do you think the signatory country to the treaty should act?
How do I think they should act? Well, I can't really say exactly what I think. But for instance, in the case of Canada with Trudeau, well, some of them should perhaps drop dead, but I don't think they'll do that. So I think a lot of these, look, a lot of these countries, a lot of these European countries, they've allowed massive immigration from the Middle East and Northern Africa to take place. In other words, what I call it the second Muslim crusade, where you have them. And by the way, the most extreme elements, the Islamists will tell you this, is exactly what they're intending. Their influence in countries like France, their influence throughout Europe is very significant now because you have these demographic changes, these population moves, and so they're pandering to them. I think what you're seeing is a very weak Europe, and Europe getting even weaker, that it is surrendering Western values and principles in the name of politics. And I think you see in the United States, you know, the red-blooded American Yanks, we're not ready to surrender our principles and our values to anybody. But Europe is much more prepared to do that, and I think you see that happening now. So they sign in with the ICC. I don't know if they do that for cover, because they don't ever want to be charged by the ICC, or they give up their sovereignty to these international organizations and so forth and so on. How should they react? They should speak out against what's taking place. But when you look in Britain, you know, the wrong government's in charge. When you look in France, the wrong government's in charge. When you look throughout Europe, you have these weak left of center governments that are running these societies and running scared of these changed demographics in their own country. So I don't think you're going to see any change from them.
How do you think the Israeli government handled itself during the prosecution?
I think the Israeli government has done everything it can do and more. I mean, it's made 100% clear where it stands. You have an extraordinarily articulate and intelligent prime minister. And the fact that his English is so beautiful. I mean, he communicates with the American people through his videos. I think they have an enormous impact. And I think, as I say, the American people stand with him. They're disgusted by this. The idea that some nobody or some nobodies get together and issue an arrest warrant against the democracy, against the leader of the democracy who is defending his country, against barbarians who are trying to slaughter their people. I mean, that's exactly the opposite of why this entity was created in the first place. And so what we see is Iran, Qatar has its money in its hands everywhere, that they have bastardized this entire process, and they bastardize as they've bastardized the United Nations generally. I think your government has responded brilliantly. And I'm glad to see that Lapid and Gantz and the others are backing Netanyahu and so forth, which is something they should do. But given the fact that they're so weak and they're so contrarian, I was surprised to see it, but I was very glad to see it.
How should Prime Minister Netanyahu act regarding the ICC decision?
I think he's doing everything he can do. I think the things he has said have been extremely important. I think he's actually helped unite the United States and Israel in this cause. I think he's, maybe some people in Israel too close to, he's a profoundly important leader for Israel and the Western world. He really is a profoundly important leader. The chihuahuas that keep biting at his heels in your legal system, The Marxist leftists in your country are no different than the ones in our country. They'd rather win the day and take power than protect their country. It's grotesque, but we see it in our country. I see it in Israel as well. He's got a lot on his plate, domestically and internationally. I don't know how the man does it. They're attacking his home, literally attacking his home now. And yet look what he's accomplished. He's almost, with the will and support of the Israeli people and the strong men and women in the military, he's almost conquered Hamas. Hezbollah is running scared, even though they're still shooting rockets. One day that's going to end. Iran has been exposed. Iran, those inbreds that run that country, they are extremely nervous right now about what's taking place. All the Arab countries in the Middle East have seen this. The so-called moderate Arab countries, the Abraham Accord countries and so forth, I guarantee you they're cheering Israel on behind the scenes. I think he's a remarkable leader. I think of your other people there that had these other parties, they would buckle. They would fall like a wet noodle. They don't have a ramrod strong spine. And you have a prime minister that's had to stand up in very diplomatic ways to the exactly wrong administration that we have in our country, that has undermined the state of Israel, that says one thing out of one side of its mouth and then another thing out of the other side of its mouth. To literally have an American administration that is boycotting, withholding weapons from the state of Israel, even weapons that don't fire, like tractors that are reinforced so you can get mines off the battlefield and so forth. It's horrendous. And again, I think 80% of the American people support Israel. 80% of the American people. And I think they showed that again in this election, because Donald Trump didn't make his feelings. He didn't hide his feelings. So I think your prime minister is really a unique world leader at a time. Look, I think, Jews and Israel, we look a lot at our history. We write about our history. We never stop talking about our history. And it's everywhere you go in Israel. It's all around you. Benjamin Netanyahu will be part of that history 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now. That's how important he is.
Mark, there's a feeling that the world has gone crazy. The UN has become anti-Semitic. UNRWA supports and finances terror. There's a feeling that no matter how much proof we bring, it simply won't be enough. Do you think it's still possible to change this?
I don't know. But we have to keep fighting it.
How?
President Trump is going to appoint Elise Stefanik to the United Nations, who is an extremely strong voice for the United States and for Israel and our other free allies. The President of the United States has put together, if you look at his foreign policy team, it is extraordinary. From Secretary of State to National Security Advisor to the UN, the incoming ambassador to Israel and so forth and so on. He has sent a message throughout the world that the United States is not going to tolerate this. Also in the United States, when it comes to anti-Semitism, he's made it abundantly clear that he wants to deal with this, particularly if those riots start again and they're chasing Jews down the street. He says he's not going to put up with that. And I don't think he is going to put up with that. He's a friend of mine. He's talked to me about this. Matter of fact, I'll tell you and your audience a little secret. When he won the primary, he texted me because I'd said congratulations. He said, thank you for all you do. And he said, and I promise you, I will protect Israel. That's what he texted to me. I don't know that I've ever revealed that, but that's what he said. And I guarantee you, we have 30% of our Navy sitting out around there in the Mediterranean, the rest of the Middle East. I don't think they'll just sit there if it's necessary to back Israel and what Israel needs to do. And you might recall that I call him the president. President Trump said when Israel was responding to Iran this last time, he said, take out their nuke sites and take out their oil sites. And I think he meant it. And I think that Navy, 30% of our Navy would stay there until it was done to do what it needed to do to help support Israel. So I think there's a misunderstanding, a misreading of his foreign policy. He's not an isolationist. He's not an interventionist. When he says peace through strength, that's Reagan, peace through strength. He wants to build up our military that's been diminished somewhat under Biden. He does not want us to get into these different wars and so forth and so on. On the other hand, he's going to back our allies. And he knows, as I say, your current government, he knows he's Israel, and he's very comfortable and very strong in his defense. In the United States is speaking out for it. So that's kind of my bottom line.
So after the Trump's victory and the appointments in his cabinet, which are very pro-Israel, how do you think the relations between the U.S. and Israel will look like in the next 4 years?
I think they're going to be exceptional. I think Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump, these are historic figures. In a historic alliance, I mean, like you had during World War II, FDR and Churchill. Not that I'm a big FDR fan, but nonetheless, I see something along those lines here. You know, the United States, we're going to have to deal with communist China. We have to deal with fascistic Russia. We've got to deal with North Korea and the nuclear weapons that they've amassed. We're going to have to deal with Iran, that's funding all of them, and sending arms to Russia and so forth. So there's very dark clouds around the globe, even beyond the Middle East, that are taking place. But I will note that Russia has aligned itself with Iran, China has aligned itself with Iran, and I think President Trump and his people, his incoming, they see all this. They know what's taking place. They see the axis of evil, like in the 1930s. It's not developing, it's developed, and it's there. And one of their targets is us, the United States, both in navigable waters, both in air power. In our hemisphere, in Central and South America, the Communist Chinese have a presence now. The Russians do as well. The Russians keep flying very close to our airspace off of Alaska. So all these things are taking place. Our Navy's not big enough. Our Navy has to be built up. Now the Communist Chinese have a bigger Navy than we do. We know that. Trump knows that. We have superior air power. We have superior technology. And we have Americans. Does nobody like Americans? We know how to fight these people. I'm just being honest. Not that we want to. Not that we're instigated. They're the warmongers. We're not the warmongers. So we have all this on our plate. And the Middle East is key. Given what's going on in the Middle East, given what Iran is up to, given the fact that they're trying to get nuclear weapons. So that's part of the problem. That is Iran. And the fact that we know that if they get nuclear weapons, they don't seek just to be a regional power. They seek to be an international power.
And Mark, is there any chance we will see you in his administration?
Me? No. I mean, not to get into anything confidential, but I was asked about a year ago if there was a particular position. I said, no way. I got to do what I'm doing. I got to do what I'm doing. I served in the Reagan administration for 8 years, which is I use my platform, which God has blessed me with, on TV, on radio, on digital. I use these platforms to advance the cause of liberty and security, and I'm going to continue to use them for that purpose. I don't need to be on the inside, managing 100,000 bureaucrats. I can do what I do on the outside. The American people and I, we can talk to each other, we can organize, we can lobby, we can do what we need to do.
And Mark, how do you think the Middle East, the state of Israel, Judea and Samaria will look under President Trump?
I don't know, and I don't think he would know. I think he would say that's up to Israel, that's up to what they do. I don't want to get involved in all their internal affairs and so forth. But I can tell you that people in Judea and Samaria will have some of their freedom back. This idea that the United States reaches into your country and reaches specifically into these communities in Judea, Samaria, the ancestral homeland of the Jews, and starts punishing Israeli citizens, travel restrictions and everything. This is grotesque. It's not even lawful in the United States. It would be as if a country did that to us and said, you know what, we don't like you people in Montana, so we're doing this and we're doing this. And I also think in soon-to-be Ambassador Huckabee, he understands. He says, no West Bank. I mean, you have to really be ignorant to talk about the West Bank. West Bank of what? Jordan? Jordan doesn't have a West Bank. I mean, I call it Israel's East Bank, if that makes any sense. That's the East Bank of Israel, if you want to talk about banks. But I don't think Donald Trump is really focused on, I don't know, this settlement here, quote unquote, this settlement here, quote unquote, or as I call them, these communities and developments, that's what they are, here and here. I really don't think that draws his attention, and I don't think it should. He's probably thinking, Israel, do what Israel needs to do internally. That's your business. It's not our business.
And what do you think about the New York court's decision to postpone Trump trial and possibly overturn it?
I don't think they're going to overturn it. This acting state judge, who's a radical leftist, who was appointed by another state judge who's elected, a Democrat, he should let go of the case. He should have dismissed it already. But this is the guy that oversaw what we consider to be a very unconstitutional trial in violation of due process, much like your judiciary sometimes, quite frankly. And it was really outrageous. And my argument is, and my argument will win the day, is that this case ought to get out of New York, get out of the Democrat gulag of their legal system. His lawyers need to get it to the United States Supreme Court, because there's no New York authority, there's no state authority. In our country, we have this federalism system, which I love, but New York does not have the authority to interfere with the President of the United States, the incoming President of the United States. They don't have the power to sentence him, to do any of these things. Our federal Department of Justice said a long time ago, you cannot criminalize a president. In other words, you can't indict him, you can't drag him through a criminal trial while he's President of the United States. And even after he's President, you can't hang over his head sentencing and all these other things. In your country, they'll go after a sitting prime minister, they'll try and throw him in the gulag, maybe he smoked a cigar looking south rather than west, and you got a whole weird system over there that I really have condemned over the years. Here we have a system that's not supposed to be like that. We have a system that really is supposed to be fairly nonpartisan and objective, and the President of the United States is uniquely immune from criminal charges involving his office. Okay? And even criminal charges that may not involve his office, because he's the head of the executive branch, the head of the military, the head of diplomacy, and all these other things. And you cannot have our position, our official position in our government, you cannot have some unelected federal prosecutor or elected local prosecutor by the party opposite interfering with the decision of the American people to put, say, Donald Trump into the presidency. So it's a very wise position, it's a very smart position, but this little bastard judge and prosecutor, these two guys, hardcore leftists, they're interfering. So my argument is, get it out of the state system, file what we call a writ with the Supreme Court. They'll have a vote. There's 9 members. It only takes 4 to decide whether to take it up and put an end to it. So I think in the end, there will be an end put to this.
Do you think the world has become a dangerous place for Jews?
Yes. I don't think there's really any place where Jews can go that are completely safe, even in the United States. But I would say to my fellow Jews, that means you need to be stronger than ever before. You need to be louder than ever before. We need to be more united than ever before. We need to keep history in mind so we understand that we need to confront this in every way we possibly can, whether it's in our own communities, whether it is legally or any other way. So I see the spread of this anti-Semitism everywhere, all over the world. We all see it for reasons I talked about earlier and other reasons as well. So yes, we're going through another one of these cycles, another one of these periods where the hatred, the visceral hatred just for being a Jew is spreading it out there. So, like in our country, we need to elect a leader who's going to fight it. And in these European countries, the same thing. You mentioned Hungary as an example. You can mention Argentina as an example. You can mention one or two other countries as an example that are standing up to this, that are fighting this, and so forth and so on. And that's what we have to do. Like the ICC, that's an assault on Benjamin Netanyahu, but it's an assault on the state of Israel. It's an assault on the Jewish people. It's an affront. It's corrupt. It's perverse. And we know why they're doing it. And you can see the people in the United States have rallied and attacked it. But you can see the clown in Canada and some of these other clowns in the European countries, they've embraced it. So we just have to do everything we can to make ourselves heard, seen, don't hide, speak out, be strong, and unite.
Mark, what message would you like to convey to the people in Israel?
The message I would like to express is this. I love you. I support you 100%. I'm one of you. I didn't go to Israel till I was 60 years old. I'm 67 now. And yet I always supported Israel because my parents told me, Israel, support Israel. And we all know if Israel ceased to exist, the Jewish people cease to exist. The history of the Jewish people ceases to exist. The Holy Land, all the ancestral sites cease to exist. And by the way, for the Jews and the Christians, they cease to exist. The Christians, particularly the evangelical Christians, the faithful Christians, they understand 100%. And they have the back of the Israeli people too and the Jewish people too. So I would say this. I'm a proud Jew. I'm prouder of being a Jew than I ever have been at any time in my life. And we have a lot to be proud for and proud of. And one of those things is our belief through thousands of years in humanity and in God and free will. And I think that's what we represent, and that's what our enemies oppose. So that would be my message, if it's worth anything.
Mark, I want to thank you for being our voice. Thank you for your unconditional support, and thank you so much for this interview.
Well, Libby, same to you and your wonderful channel that does such important work for the state of Israel. I always enjoy it very, very much. God bless you. God bless the people of Israel and the people of the United States.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.